Hey, what's going on YouTube? Today I'm going to be talking to you about the 5 mistakes that new photographers typically make and how to stop making. Number 1, shooting in JPEG. If you shoot in JPEG, obviously you don't have to worry about the storage size. You can take as many photos as you want and store them all and with not really much problem at all. When you shoot in RAW, there is a bigger image file size factor, but what you get in return from being able to edit those images is just so much more data contained in each image. For instance, let's say you get your photo home and there's a photo that you took and you exposed for the highlights and you want to bring the shadows up or bring the highlights down. You can do that pretty seamlessly when you shoot in RAW because there's so much more data contained in that image. Whereas in JPEG, if you try to change any of the shadows or highlights, a lot of times you lose a lot of the detail. And so what you see is when you shoot in JPEG, if you're trying to edit them or even retouch them, you're gonna lose a lot of image quality or detail within those images. I think the trade-off for shooting in RAW is a lot more worth it, especially when you start shooting higher level images or trying to edit those images. Now, again, there's 10% of use cases where you should expose for what you're exposing for, shoot in JPEG and ship the photos off to the customer, sure, or your client or your model, whatever. But for the most part, I think shooting RAW is one of the biggest mistakes that you can make as a photographer. Number 2, brand new gear. And this may be controversial, but when I first started doing photography, I bought most of my gear used. Only because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, what I wanted to shoot with, and I didn't want to spend a whole lot of money. And surprisingly, what you'll find is that when you do purchase camera gear used, whether it be lenses or cameras, typically if it works, it'll work. One of the biggest benefits of purchasing your gear used is that you're not necessarily tied to it and it doesn't lose a lot of value when you use it. Let's say for instance, today you want to start photography and you want to start with a higher level camera, but you didn't want to break the bank spending $2-3 grand on images, cameras and lenses and such. You can go back and get a Canon 5D Mark III, 5D Mark IV, or you can get a Canon EOS R, which I'm sure there's a ton of them used on the market. Go buy it on eBay, and then you can just use it for as long as you want, right? You want to use it for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and if you decide you want to upgrade, you just go sell it used on eBay just like you did, and you really won't lose that much money. I personally recommend purchasing gear on eBay or used on Nextdoor as opposed to renting gear because of how much money it costs to rent, and then you're typically tied into purchasing that gear brand new. One of the biggest things that will change your photography from being amateur to looking a lot more professional is not shooting from eye level. So typically what you'll do, I don't know if you've ever handed your phone over to one of your friends or to one of your family members, like, hey, take a picture of me. What do they typically do? They take the phone, put it here, they take it here, they take the photo right from eye level. And there's really nothing amazing about those photos, right? You get them back, you're just like, oh, these are basic photos. What really changes the game is when you start changing the perspective of which you're shooting from. You can shoot from a lower angle, you can shoot from higher up, you can shoot from way low, shooting straight up. There's so many different perspectives that you can shoot from to make your images look a lot more interesting. A lot of the things that draw people's eyes to images is that the perspective that you shoot from and the angles that you're creating are different than what our human eye sees every day. So get creative with how you shoot images. A caveat to that also is to make sure that you're shooting, especially if you're shooting portraits, shooting straight, right? What photographers will do is they'll take their camera and they'll shoot a lower angle slightly or a slightly up angle. But what you really want to do is have your camera with an even plane, because that will, and I don't know what it is about it to be honest with you, but it just looks a lot more professional. So make sure if you're shooting, you're not shooting with the lens down or up at any angles like that. Try to shoot straight on. Unless there's a specific look you're going for, obviously change it up. But that will go leaps and bounds to changing the way your photography looks. Another thing, skewed horizons and objects coming out of your subjects' heads. The most distracting things about images are shooting and your image not being on a level plane. You want whatever horizon line or reference lines, maybe they're sitting on a bench or there's a building in the background. You want those lines to be straight up and down so that your image looks professional. If you've ever seen an image where you're taking a photo and the horizon line is just crooked and then your person is facing a different direction, it's all over the place and it's not attractive to their eye, right? A straight horizon line typically creates balance within your image from a composition standpoint, and it makes the image just look a lot more professional. So make sure 2 things, you're watching your reference lines or horizons lines, and you can even go into your camera and turn on the grid and use the grid to really line up the lines within the images with the lines of the objects in real life to make sure those images are straight. Also, watch for trees, light poles, signs, any other object coming out of your subject's head. That's one of the biggest things that distract your audience away from the subject, right? You don't want, a tree growing out of their head. Number 5, purchasing gear that you don't need. A lot of times, and you can ask any photographer, I think a lot of us have been guilty of this. Well, you go on YouTube, you see somebody doing something cool with some piece of gear, you're like, oh, I need that. When in reality, you probably don't. Look at the gear that you have, see what it is that you need, and decide whether or not you actually need this to make more content or not. A lot of times what people would be better off spending is your money on your skills, maybe taking an online course, your workflow software, and speeding up how your workflow when it comes to editing, bringing on new business, or advertising. Of course, all this is moot. If this is just something that you're doing on the side, so be it. Go crazy, do whatever you want, try whatever you want, do whatever you want. But if you're trying to make your business profitable and you need this to survive, it's very important to be a lot more prudent with how you spend your money when it comes to photography. Anyway, these are just a few tips that I've got. I thought I'd make a quick video. Guys, let me know down below if there's any suggestions that you guys have that could help me or any other photographers out here. So thanks for watching. I'll see y'all in the next one.